Would you mind just telling us your first name and a little bit about your childhood?
Sure, my name is Melanie Shults, and I am almost 50 years old. I was born in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and when I was about 3 years old, my parents got divorced, and my mom ended up getting remarried, and she moved to Idaho, and my dad stayed in Florida, and I had two older sisters, and so we went to live with my mom and my stepdad in Idaho, and then we spent our summers in Florida with my dad. So when people ask me where I'm from, I kind of say I'm from both of those places. Um, yeah, and my childhood was all right. It was all right. I mean, there were a lot of good things about it, good experiences that happened. I have a really large family, some pretty close relationships with a lot of my cousins and my siblings and everything, and so that was all really good. Um, but I had, I had a sexual assault that happened when I was a young kid. A classmate of mine in elementary school, and it was something that was pretty traumatic for me that I held on to and honestly did not tell anybody about it until 2 years ago, I guess it was. Um, so that was just something that I, hung on to and just kind of was like a little bit of a dark cloud for me. My stepdad was a Presbyterian minister, and I kind of felt like it was something that I couldn't claim because it somehow made me wrong or, something that I had done. Um, yeah, and I think growing up in the church was interesting for me. I never felt super close to God. I felt like church was kind of a thing where it was work for me being part of the church family and the preacher's kid and just having to be involved in everything and having to be friends with everybody and keep up sort of this image about who I was and sort of this feeling that I needed to be perfect in the eyes of everyone. Um, so that was just kind of a hard situation, and I felt like it was hard to be away from my dad. It was really great when I spent time with him, but when I was not with him, he just didn't connect a lot, so there wasn't a lot of consistent relationship going on. So, yeah, I think that's probably good.
Did you have any dreams or aspirations as a child?
I was like a super creative person. Um, and I don't know, I'm trying to think about that. I did like work for an interior design place when I was a teenager, and I really liked it. And as far as like my own dreams, I don't really think I had a lot. Like I like to do art, I like to write. Yeah, so I don't know.
Would you mind telling us a little bit more about your relationship with your dad and how that relationship generally felt for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think as I mentioned before, my dad was living in Florida and I was living in Idaho most of the time, except for in the summer. Um, my dad had the three of us, and then we had a stepbrother, and then another two children that he had with his second wife. So in the summer, there were six kids. And I felt like when I was with my dad, he would do a lot of stuff with us. We would go, fishing or canoeing or just like a lot of activities. We did a lot of traveling together. But that it was hard because he had so many kids. I didn't feel like I got a lot of one-on-one attention with him. It was kind of like he prepared activities and we went and did stuff together, but I didn't feel like I was super close with him or that he really understood me very well, or yeah. And yeah, and so I just felt like I wasn't super close with him. And my stepdad, having married my mom when I was 3, it was sort of like he seemed more like my dad figure. And we were pretty close, but he was a little more of a person that kind of directed a lot. So it didn't kind of told me what to do and how to be and that sort of thing, rather than trying to understand who I was or my needs or anything like that. But we did have a pretty good relationship, or pretty close relationship. Yeah.
How would you sum it up, how your relationship with your stepdad felt, briefly, 1 or 2 sentences, and the relationship with your biological father?
Yeah, I mean, I think the relationship with my stepdad was warm, and comforting, but pretty demanding. Like, I felt like it was pretty demanding, as far as like what he expected me to do or expected me to be. And my dad was like, I felt loved, but it was distant, and I felt like I always wanted a little bit more. That I wanted more connection with him. I wanted to hear from him more regularly. And so it felt like I was just missing out, right? Not getting what I needed from it.
What about your relationship with your mom and how that felt?
So my mom had a lot of anxiety, and she did tend to drink quite a bit. And I felt like often our relationship was more like I was taking care of her sometimes, and needing to be pretty independent and pretty responsible on my own. And that I did a lot through her entire life. I did a lot of just kind of taking care of her emotionally, right? And I loved my mom. I felt loved by my mom. But again, I just didn't always feel like my needs were being represented in the relationship, or that she was taking care of the things that I needed from her.
What's the biggest thing you learned from your parents?
I think that despite feeling like they had, or at least my mom and my stepdad kind of had a vision for what they wanted me to be, I got this feeling from all 3 of my parents that I could do anything that I wanted. That, that I was capable, that I was intelligent, that, if I set my mind to something, I could do what I wanted to do. I think that was probably like the biggest sort of message that came down, and the feeling that I had, when I was growing up. Yeah.
Can you tell us about your first love and how that felt?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you say that, I think about like the first real romantic relationship that I had, which was a boyfriend that I had in high school. And he and I met, it was his senior year, it was my junior year of high school that we met. And I felt like part of the relationship was me sort of taking care of him. Like he had, I don't know, like some self-confidence, even though he was like good at everything, really, like every sport he was really good at, but he had some self-confidence, and some depression and some things that I was always trying to lighten his life up, And then my stepbrother, who I was pretty close with, and he committed suicide right before I graduated from high school, or it was like December of my senior year of high school. And so my boyfriend at the time kind of became my person, right? Like helping me with that grieving process and trying to make sure I was okay, you know? And so that's kind of how that worked out. And then we dated for a bit, and then he was Mormon and I was not Mormon, and he, you know, kind of wanted to have the relationship be more serious, and I just wasn't ready to do that or wanting to do that or whatever. So we went our separate ways.
Briefly, how did that feel, as a whole, the relationship, if you could summarize it in less than a sentence?
I think it just felt heavy, you know? It just felt heavy. Like he was kind of going through his own stuff, and then I was going through my own stuff, and sometimes we would have moments of lightness, but a lot of it was just around really hard things that were happening, you know?
Can you tell us about your first loss or heartbreak?
As I was mentioning before, when I had the sexual assault experience when I was in elementary school, that was probably my first loss of like feeling like, I don't know, like I had lost my identity as a pure person, that somebody had taken something from me. And yeah, I think just feeling like I had this one identity before that happened, and then this other identity that I claimed after that happened. So.
Can you describe more of that switch or the identity that you claimed after?
Yeah, I mean, I think that after it happened, it just weighed really heavy on me, like, you know, like I had done something wrong, or I had sinned, or this, you know, I was this terrible person because I let this thing happen to me that was, you know, not in any way my fault, but it was almost like, you know, I felt sort of innocent before it happened, and then like not anymore. Like, how could something like this happen? Why would this happen? You know, it was like this, the world was good, and then it was like, no, actually there's bad people in the world that are going to do things that are not going to feel good to you. And I think it created some of that anxiety and fear that I don't really think I had very much of before that period of time.
Who would you say first taught you love, and how?
Well, it's a tricky question. It's the definition of love, right? Because I really feel like my current husband is the person that is really teaching me about love. You know, I mean, I think my parents loved me, and I felt that to some degree, but this is the first time in my life when I'm really finding out what it's like to have a really genuine, healthy, and loving relationship. And it's just different. It just feels different.
How do you contrast that healthy relationship now versus an unhealthy one? What's the biggest contrast for you?
I think my current husband and I are aware of the fact that we're learning so much from each other, and that we're our own whole beings within ourselves, coming together in a relationship that's about teaching and learning, and not about ego or control or power or manipulation or judgment. You know, he and I are both like, we've both been through it in a lot of ways, right? A lot of stuff we've had and baggage and different things that have happened, right? But we just like 100% accept each other, you know? And so you just have that feeling, and I mean, I just have that feeling in this relationship that I can be 100% of who I am, and vulnerable and authentic, and he's gonna just love me, and there's a purpose. Anytime we have conflict or something that's happening, there's always a lesson that we're needing to learn, right? And we're open to that. And it's not that it's the perfect relationship. I mean, no one has that, right? But we'll have patterns of things that are not going right, and then eventually we'll see it, and then we'll grow through it, right? And that's just kind of how it goes. And he makes me a better person, and I make him a better person, you know? And I think that, you know, one of the things that just seemed to be how my family would work with each other is there was a lot of judgment, a lot of that, a lot of people trying to get their needs met from other people, right? Like not being clear about what they needed, not communicating what they needed. Like my mom in many ways kind of lived her life in doing what everybody else wanted, right? And not really carving out her own space and then communicating that. And so I feel like the way I grew up with my family, it was like we loved each other, but if you were upset about something, you didn't talk about it, you internalized it. It wasn't a safe space to talk about. So it was just a different, it was like love down here versus this love up here. You know, it's like two different, they feel totally different to me. Totally different.
What's your definition of love?
God, right? Mm-hmm. God is love. And yeah, and I feel like anybody that tries to tell you a different story from that is trying to get some level of power or control over a situation. You know, that there's a lot of people that do things in the name of religion or something that are not the things that are loving, right? That notion of God being love. And yeah, and I feel as though God accepts us just the way we are. And that's really at the heart.
How does that feel?
Good. Yeah, it's like the best feeling, right?
What's a good day look like for you?
Most days are good days. Most days are good days, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I like to ground my day in the morning with reading and meditation and sometimes scripture, and just I do find that when we let our brains get too busy, or we're having too much anxiety, or we're overthinking about things, that we have trouble, right? And trying to live each day with a clear mind and a clear heart, and sort of just following the breadcrumbs, the messages, the things that feel right in my intuition. When I do those things, then I have a good day. When I trust God, when I surrender to God, I have a good day. When I try to be too much of my thinking and my ego and the craziness that can happen sometimes, I don't have a good day.
So you just touched on it. The next question is, to tell us about a bad day and then how you get through those bad days.
You know, I mentioned to you before we started filming that I used to have a lot of mental health issues. A lot of anxiety, really high anxiety, social anxiety, like this kind of thing would have been super hard for me in the past. Depression, distracted thinking, and I have had to be hospitalized twice for mental health issues. And yeah, I mean, the bad day is when I am so caught up in, you know, my brain and anxiety and fear and worry and depression that I can't get out of bed, that I don't want to move. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to do anything. I want to be isolated in a cocoon and cry all day. You know, and I had this really powerful experience that happened last year. And I say that I broke up with my anxiety. But it was kind of like this one day, things were, you know, I just was realizing how much stuff was going on in my brain, and then how much I sort of had control over that. And when it was almost like the mirror just was turned around or something one day, and I'm like, you've been driving yourself crazy, and you don't need to do that. And I went through this whole thing where the first time I was hospitalized, I had never felt like I'd had a lot of mental health issues before then, and there was a really sort of a crisis situation. And after that, it was like I came out of the hospital and I was on all of these medications, going to therapy, had a psychiatrist, all this stuff that I had never dealt with before. And all of a sudden I had this identity of being a mental health patient, of somebody that has mental health issues. Like, I had this identity of I'm a crazy person, like I'm not okay, right? And I lived with that for 15 years, really, of just being like, I don't know, like trying to be okay, but felt like even when I was in therapy, it was almost like my therapist knew better than I did. I needed to be fixed. I was broken. I was wrong. There was something. And that whole experience for me, just, I claimed this identity that I had never had before. And it was all negative and scary. And I felt like I couldn't trust myself. And I was like beholden to these medications. And I had to, you know, trust other people instead of my own person. And I lived with that for the longest time. And I started seeing a new therapist, and she was like, you know, you're one of the like most grounded people I know. Like let's talk about this, right? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this identity that you claim you have, right? And so things started shifting for me around that. Like, what if I'm not broken? What if I'm actually okay? And I met with somebody who works as a spiritual healer. And it was somebody that I had known from earlier in my life. And I was never like the person that would go to a spiritual healer, but I had known her, so I was like, okay, I'm going to go talk to her. And I was right at this cusp of like breaking up with my anxiety, like I don't need this anymore. Why have I carried this? Why have I bought into this identity? And she met with me and she was like, you know, I feel like a lot of what's happening with you is that you are really in tune with the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions of other people, and you take it on, and you take on their fears and their anxiety and their pain, and it becomes part of you, and you don't know what's yours and what's theirs, right? And I was like, yeah, no, I think you're right, you know, because during COVID, I felt the anxiety of the whole world. Like I just felt it on my shoulders. I would go out, go to the grocery store. I just felt, it felt horrible to me, like the whole time. And she was just kind of like, you know, I think if you learn how to separate what's yours and what you're sensing from other people, that you'll be able to manage what's happening with you a lot better. And that, like, God has given you these gifts of being able to read people's energy and connect with people. Like, he's given you these gifts. And she's like, I don't think you're crazy. Like, I don't think you're, like, I think you just don't know how to deal with what's happening with you sometimes. And anyway, so there were just like a number of things that kind of happened, and then I haven't had really a bad day since then. The anxiety, I don't have anxiety anymore. I don't have depression anymore. I've been going off of many of my medications with the help of my doctor, put together a plan to say like, hey, we're gonna, because I was taking several medications for anxiety and I don't need them anymore. And, you know, I changed my life. I quit my corporate job. I went back to school. I'm doing something completely new, completely different. And I love it. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there that have lived in places where they've attached to an identity that's a negative identity. That's not really truly who they are. And that if we rewrite the story, do a mindset shift, look at things a different way, and you say, you're not defective. You're gifted. You're not wrong. You're special. You're not ill. You have a purpose. It's a really powerful story. You know, it's a really powerful story.
What's a person or an event that's shaped you, good or bad?
When I talk about the therapist that I started going to, Jody, I think she helped me shape myself, I guess, right? In this way of being, let's challenge the paradigm, you know? Let's, instead of limiting yourself all the time with your thinking and your brain, let's challenge the paradigm. And gave me some confidence around, you know, that I'm okay, that I'm capable, that I can be fine, you know, in the world. Because I think that's when I started to think about things differently. You know, I always managed to be okay, even when I got, you know, even when I was in the hospital and all that, and I always rebounded. I had a decent job. I did all the things, right? Took care of my kids, whatever. But inside, I never felt okay, you know? And that just anxiety and everything that I was carrying about the sense of my identity was just hard, you know. And she really opened my eyes to that. She really challenged that, or made me challenge it, and I so appreciate that.
What inspires you?
Everything, every day. Humans. Humans inspire me. Yeah, just how unique everybody is, and how when we stop to help each other, there's so much beauty in what can happen, right? Yeah, and I think that's where I find my inspiration these days, is when people open up, situations open up, you know, and we start, I mean, I've seen it a lot more recently, just wherein people are able just to be more vulnerable and connect and work through the things that they're dealing with. But we have just a lot more we can do together, I guess, sometimes, than we can do on our own.
What's been a humbling experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely being in the psych ward, right? Like, absolutely, you know, getting knocked down so far. Yeah.
Go in your mind and think. This life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual. Can you tell us about a time in your life that you can relate to the word war?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that mental war, right, that I was in for so long, with myself, with anxiety, with fear, just fighting, you know, fighting with myself every day, fighting to be okay, fighting to not let the darkness consume me, you know.
How do you win that war? How do you fight that war? How do you engage in that? Or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the war is over. I really do. I mean, I'm hopeful of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been 2 years of being a lot better, and a year of being awesome, right? So I'm hoping that continues for me. But you know, I mean, the things that have helped me in the past is prayer, and meditation. I do a lot of meditation, exercise. Yeah, just writing, journaling, that kind of thing has been useful for me.
Do you still do those things as far as the grounding aspect, or as far as just...
Yeah, I mean, I do all of those things, but it is, when I pray now, it's prayers of thanks,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and when I write now, it's inspirational writing that I share with other people, or I write poetry, or, you know, it's not, and when I sit to meditate, it's like, okay, you're still in just a few minutes, right? It used to be meditation was part of the war, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was so hard to meditate, but I kept trying to do it. And when I wrote in my journal, it was like, all these things in my head, and I'm so worried, or all this is going wrong. Like, my journal entries were all sort of negative and tangled, right? My prayers were more pleading, why is this happening to me? You know, that kind of thing. And now it's just different. It's like, I still do the things, but my attitude and the way I show up is just different, you know, it's different.
If you can go in your mind and think, this life event can be mental, physical, or spiritual, can you tell us about a time in your life that you relate to the word peace?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I'm at right now. It's interesting because I reached out to an old friend. was kind of a random thing. I just felt like I needed to reach out to somebody I hadn't talked to in a really long time, and we were engaging just in a chat. And he said, "There's something different about you." He's like, "You seem like the same person, but you just seem like peaceful and calm and just different." I was like, "Yeah, I am different." I feel like I had this awakening of sorts that everything's different. Everything feels different now than it used to feel. And my perspective is different now. But I would also say the times I felt most peaceful are usually when I'm doing something nature related. I was just in Florida and was able to catch a couple really amazing sunrises, and just sitting there watching that. The beauty of nature and the color and the feeling, and it's like I'll go to church and that has some meaning for me, but I find God in nature. I feel that's where I'm most peaceful, is in those moments.
Can you tell us about a truly difficult time in your life, how it felt, how you endured?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really hard time during COVID. I really did. As I mentioned, my anxiety levels were so high. I felt horrible all the time. I wasn't sleeping. I was afraid to go out of my house. I didn't want to do anything. My youngest son was also having a really hard time during that period, and we were kind of feeding off of each other. I feel like it was my negative energy was making him sick, his negative energy was making me sick. It was just a very hard and toxic situation for us. And that was actually the second time I had to go into the hospital, and I ended up, his dad and I got divorced, and his dad lives in Texas, and so I ended up sending him to go live with his dad for a while because he lives with me most of the time. And he was doing online school, so he could just do that down there. And it was so hard because I felt like a failure. I felt like my mental health issues are so extreme that I can't take care of my child right now, and I can't help him and I can't fix things for him. And it was really, really hard. And it was at that point that I had this sort of spiritual relationship, but kind of disconnection from God. And I felt like he was leading me to go to online church, so I started doing that, and that was like the only thing that was making me feel better. Like the only thing every week that tended to make me feel better was that. But I did just get to this point where I was, just down on my knees crying, like I can't do this. I can't do it. And I just prayed. And I was just like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. But it was one sort of little breadcrumb after another that God was dropping for me that was like, he's like, hey, I'm here. I just need you to listen. I just need you to trust me. And so I did. Eventually. Took a bit. But yeah, I did. Because that was the only thing left to do. I knew I couldn't fix it on my own. I had tried too many times.
What's the happiest moment in your life?
I do feel like really when I broke up with my anxiety. It was, I don't know. I mean, people talk about miracles. It's the only thing I can think of that was that experience for me, because it was one day I was consumed and the next day I was not. And it was like this weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Like, I never knew I could feel that good. That okay, just in my skin and in my brain, to just feel calm and okay and good.
What keeps you up at night?
Most nights I get up at about 2 a.m. and I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And I have a yogurt and I go out in my backyard and I look at the stars. Depending on how cold it is, sometimes it's like 2 minutes, other it's like 10 or 15 minutes or whatever. I look at the stars, say a little prayer, come back in, go back to bed. But it's just like this cycle. But it's not like I'm worried or I'm anxious or I just wake up and I'm hungry.
It's just natural.
It's just a thing that I do. It happens pretty much every night. So it's like, whatever, it's all good.
What keeps you going every day?
You know, I think it's just this feeling that that I have a much better idea of what my purpose is now. And I lived my life for a long time not knowing what that was. And I am I'm doing this whole thing with interior design, and I love it. And there's certain ways in which I'm using that to help other people, but I just feel like my purpose now is really just to help people, you know, and waking up every day going, who am I going to meet today? What's going to happen today, you know? And I just love it. You know, I just love it. I love engaging with people. I love hearing their stories. I love helping. And I wasn't always like that. I mean, I was a lot more money, ego, image, right? But life feels better when it's not all about you, you know? It just feels better. It's like...
Seems easier.
It does seem easier. It really does, yeah.
Imagine you're in the hospital today with only hours to live. What would be your regrets, if any?
I don't have a lot of regret, because when I look back on the things that have happened in my life, I feel as though there has been a purpose and a meaning for everything, even if it was hard, even if I felt I made a mistake, like there was a reason in it. And so I don't feel a lot of regret. I feel like, though, I've been caught up a lot. I've had a lot of time when things weren't going great and I was caught up in my own brain and maybe didn't have as much fun as I wanted to, right? And I think about my youngest son right now, and he's gone through, it's just a hard period, right? And he's growing through it and coming out of it, and it's beautiful to see him smile again. And I know we're going to have some good times in the future. But if I were to die today, I would say I wish I had spent more time playing with him in the recent years, just spending fun time together. But again, I feel like his struggle has been for a reason, and that God has a plan for him. And we just have to be patient and watch that unfold,
So you're alive and well. Do you feel that you can either change or be at peace with that regret you just stated?
Yeah, absolutely.
You told me what your dreams were as a kid. What are your dreams now?
I'm living so much of my dreams right now. Yeah, I think part of it is like continuing my program at school and building, the business that I'm working on. But a lot of it is about just going with the flow and trusting and seeing how things unfold. Like, the less I try to plan and set goals and say, I'm going to do these specific things, and the more I just kind of trust in the way my life is opening up, the better things seem to go. So, I think as far as like dreams, I want to keep helping people. I want all the experiences that I've had with mental health. I feel like there's lessons there, and in some ways I'm supposed to share that. It's such an issue for so many people in our country. So many people struggle with it, and I don't claim to have all the answers, and I don't know for sure if I'm going to continue to be okay every day. Now I'm playing with the microphone. To be okay every day, but if there's some way that I could help other people on their mental health journey get to a better place, and I think losing my brother at a young age, I don't want people to keep dying. I've had people talking to me at school about they don't want to live anymore, and I just don't want to see that for people, but it's everywhere. And I feel like part of it has to do with our kind of our society and the things that we put priority on, and just the way we put so much value on achievement and perfection and things, and nobody feels good enough anymore. And we see all this stuff on social media of people's great vacations and all the things, and nobody feels good enough anymore. And so my dream really is to help people to feel good enough, to feel accepted, to feel loved, and to accept that the bad things that have happened, or the mistakes, or the regrets, or whatever people are holding on to have this realization that there's beauty and meaning in everything. And I feel like we're kind of on this path where we keep in this cycle where we keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And sometimes we break the cycle. And if we break the cycle, we kind of go up a little bit in terms of our evolution and our who we are as people and our acceptance of self, and then we'll cycle again, but that sometimes folks just get stuck and they can't get out of it, So that's kind of a long-winded answer for that question, but my dream is, what I want out of the rest of my life is to feel like I've had a positive difference, to feel like I've helped people, to feel like I've taken from the ugly and the hard and the bad things that I have gone through and somehow made beauty out of that for somebody else.
You're the co-author of your life story. What's your picture perfect ending?
I just see, like, I don't know, like a cliff, like a bunch of people standing up on a tall surface overlooking a beautiful view, and they're all just like holding hands. You know?
That's it.